Everyone in the hospital knew the rule. When Valeria Romano walked through those glass doors, you lowered your eyes, stepped aside, and stayed silent. Doctors who had saved hundreds of lives suddenly forgot how to speak. Nurses who worked double shifts suddenly became invisible. Even security guards pretended not to notice her presence. Because Valeria Romano wasn't just another wealthy woman. She was the wife of Marco Romano, a man whose name alone had ended careers, erased families, and buried secrets so deep they never resurfaced. And Valeria ruled this hospital the same way her husband ruled the city, with quiet cruelty and absolute fear. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to threaten. All it took was a look. That night, the hospital was unusually quiet. It was 2:17 a.m., the hour when machines hummed louder than human voices and the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Most of the staff prayed Valeria wouldn't appear during the night shift. But she did. She arrived dressed in silk and diamonds, walking into the intensive care unit as if she owned every heartbeat inside it. Her eyes locked onto an elderly patient who dared to inconvenience her plans, and within seconds, fear spread down the hallway like a disease. Orders were given, lines were crossed, and no one stopped her. No one except one person, a night nurse, tired, underpaid, and completely ignored by everyone in that room, took a single step forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg. She didn't tremble. She simply spoke. And that one sentence did something no one thought was possible. It froze Valeria Romano in place. It shattered the silence fear depended on, and it set off a chain of events that would expose lies, unravel power, and bring the most feared woman in the hospital to her knees. By sunrise, nothing would be the same. Because that night nurse didn't know she was challenging a Mafia queen. She only knew one thing. Some rules are meant to be broken. By day, Saint Aurelius Private Hospital looked like a sanctuary. Glass walls, white floors polished to perfection, fresh flowers delivered every morning. From the outside, it was a place of healing, where lives were saved, hope was restored, and miracles happened quietly behind closed doors. But by night, everyone who worked there knew the truth. Saint Aurelius did not belong to medicine. It belonged to Valeria Romano. Her influence wasn't written on paper, but it was felt in every hallway. Doctors adjusted treatment plans without asking questions. Administrators approved requests that made no medical sense. Complaints disappeared. Records were altered. And when Valeria walked in, conversations stopped mid-sentence. She didn't come often. She didn't need to. The fear of her arrival was enough. Valeria Romano moved through the hospital like royalty, heels clicking softly against the floor, posture flawless, eyes sharp and calculating. She never rushed. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Everyone already knew who she was married to. Marco Romano. The man whose donations had saved the hospital years ago. The man whose money had paid for new wings, private suites, and top-tier equipment. Officially, Marco Romano was a businessman. Unofficially, no one dared to say what he really was. And Valeria? She enjoyed reminding people. That night, the night shift was thin. Fewer doctors. Fewer supervisors. Just nurses, orderlies, and exhausted staff trying to survive until morning. It was the shift Valeria preferred. The shift where no one important was around to challenge her. She arrived just after 2 a.m. Security straightened immediately. A nurse at the front desk stiffened, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure whether to stand or bow. Valeria didn't acknowledge them. She never did. Her gaze swept the lobby once, slow and deliberate, as if counting how many people were beneath her. Then she walked toward the intensive care unit. Word traveled faster than footsteps. She's here. Lower your eyes. Don't say anything. Monitors beeped steadily as Valeria entered the ICU. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Patients lay helpless behind glass walls, their lives measured in numbers and alarms. To Valeria, they were background noise. She paused outside one room. Inside lay an elderly man, thin and pale, struggling against sleep as machines breathed for him. Valeria studied him with mild irritation, as though he were an object placed where it didn't belong. "This one," she said quietly. The doctor beside her swallowed. "Ma'am, he's critical." Valeria turned her head just enough for him to see her expression. The doctor stopped talking. Her finger lifted slightly.
"Not pointing yet."
Just enough to signal intent. "I don't like delays," she said. "And I don't like inconvenience." No one argued. No one questioned her authority. They never did. Because at Saint Aurelius, fear wasn't spoken. It was enforced. And that night, just like every other night Valeria Romano appeared, the hospital prepared to obey, no matter the cost. The doctor nodded. The nurses turned away. And the elderly man in that bed had no idea what was coming. Because when people like Valeria Romano walk into a room, humanity walks out. Subscribe if you believe power should never crush the powerless. Bullies and manipulators won't. Drop "I stand for justice" below if you're not the type to look away when someone is being destroyed. The room Valeria stopped in front of was small, dim, and quiet, too quiet for her liking. Inside, the elderly man lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Tubes ran from his arms. Machines whispered softly, keeping time like a countdown no one wanted to hear. His chart hung at the foot of the bed, thick with notes, warnings, and red flags. Valeria glanced at it once, uninterested. "He's still here?" she asked, her voice smooth but sharp. The doctor beside her cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. His condition worsened earlier tonight. Moving him would be dangerous." Valeria's lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. "Dangerous for who?" she asked. No one answered. She stepped into the room, the sound of her heels echoing far louder than the heart monitor. The man's eyes fluttered open for a moment, confused, unfocused. He didn't know who she was. He only knew that someone important had arrived, and that realization alone made him tense. Valeria leaned closer, inspecting him like damaged property. "This room was reserved," she said. "My guest will arrive by morning." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we don't have another ICU bed available right now." Valeria straightened. "That sounds like a problem," she replied calmly. "And problems have solutions." Her finger lifted, this time pointing directly at the bed. "Move him." The air in the room changed instantly. A nurse near the door inhaled sharply. Another looked down at the floor. The doctor's mouth opened, then closed again. Everyone knew what she was asking. And everyone knew what it meant. Moving him could kill him. Valeria noticed the hesitation and tilted her head slightly, amused. "Do I need to repeat myself?" she asked. The doctor swallowed hard. "If we disconnect him now, there's a high risk of cardiac arrest." Valeria's eyes hardened. "Then I suggest you do it carefully," she said. "Because I don't like being told no." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. One by one, staff members looked away. No one stepped forward. No one protested. Fear pressed down on the room like a weight, reminding them of past incidents, vanished complaints, and careers that ended overnight. The doctor finally nodded. "I'll make arrangements," he said quietly. Valeria turned toward the door, satisfied. But as she took a step forward, a sound broke the silence. "Stop." The word wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was steady. Valeria paused mid-step. Slowly, she turned around. Near the doorway stood a night nurse, plain uniform, tired eyes, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She hadn't been part of the conversation. She wasn't senior staff. She wasn't anyone important. And yet, she had spoken. Every head in the room snapped toward her. The nurse took a breath, heart pounding, and met Valeria's gaze. "You can't move him," she said evenly. "Not like this." The room froze. For the first time that night, fear shifted direction. Because the unthinkable had just happened. Someone had challenged Valeria Romano. And the consequences, whatever they were going to be, had just begun. The silence that followed the nurse's words felt heavier than anything Valeria had said that night. No one moved. No one breathed. Every person in the room understood what had just happened, and why it should never have happened at all. Valeria turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Her eyes locked onto the nurse, as if seeing her for the first time. This wasn't confusion. It was disbelief. People didn't interrupt her. People didn't challenge her. People didn't exist unless she allowed it. Yet there the nurse stood. She wasn't shaking. Her voice hadn't cracked. Her posture wasn't aggressive or defiant. She stood with her hands loosely clasped in front of her, shoulders squared, eyes steady. That calm unsettled Valeria more than shouting ever could. "Excuse me?" Valeria said softly. The nurse swallowed, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct told her to step back,
To apologize.
to disappear. She had seen what happened to people who crossed Valeria Romano. But she didn't move. "You can't move him," the nurse repeated. "His blood pressure is unstable. If you disconnect him now, he won't survive the transfer." Valeria blinked once. Doctors shifted uncomfortably. One nurse quietly stepped backward, as if creating distance from the impending fallout. The machines continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to power and fear. Valeria took a slow step closer. "You work nights," she said. "That tells me everything I need to know." The words were sharp, dismissive, meant to remind the nurse of her place. "I work nights because someone has to," the nurse replied evenly. "And because patients don't stop needing care after dark." A murmur rippled through the room. Valeria's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" "Yes," the nurse said. "And that's why I'm speaking." That was the moment the air truly changed. Valeria laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You think morality applies to me?" she asked. "You think this hospital runs on feelings?" "No," the nurse said. "It runs on people doing their jobs. And tonight, my job is to keep him alive." Valeria's gaze flicked to the bed, then back to the nurse. "And if I tell you to step aside?" The nurse hesitated for the first time. Fear surged through her chest. She imagined losing her job, her license, everything she had worked for. Then she took a single step forward, placing herself directly between Valeria and the patient. "Then you'll have to go through me," she said quietly. Gasps echoed around the room. No one had ever stood in Valeria Romano's way before. Valeria stared at her, stunned, not by the act itself, but by the conviction behind it. This wasn't rebellion. This wasn't ego. This was something far more dangerous. It was principle. For the first time that night, Valeria said nothing. And somewhere down the corridor, unseen and unheard, someone else had stopped walking. Someone who had heard everything. Valeria Romano did not raise her voice.
She didn't need to.
The room already belonged to her, or, at least, it always had. And when something threatened that control, Valeria's response was never loud. It was precise. She studied the nurse for a long moment, lips pressed together, eyes calculating. Then she smiled. It was the kind of smile that made people uncomfortable without knowing why. "You're brave," Valeria said lightly. "Or, very foolish." The nurse didn't reply. She stayed where she was, her body still positioned between Valeria and the bed. The machines beside the patient continued their steady rhythm, each beep marking a second Valeria was being delayed. Valeria turned her attention to the doctor. "Remove her," she said calmly. The doctor froze. "Ma'am?" "I said remove her," Valeria repeated. "She's interfering with care." "That's not true," the nurse said. "I'm protecting the patient." Valeria ignored her. "If she's still here in 5 minutes," Valeria said to the doctor, "neither of you will be working in this city again." The threat landed exactly where she intended. The doctor's hands trembled slightly. His career flashed before his eyes. Years of study, nights on call, the life he had built. He glanced at the nurse, silently begging her to step away. But she didn't. Valeria exhaled sharply, irritated now. "You think this is a movie?" she snapped. "You think standing there makes you a hero?" She stepped closer, invading the nurse's space. "Let me explain something to you. This hospital runs because my husband allows it to run. The equipment, the funding, the protection. Without us, this place shuts down." Her voice dropped. And when places shut down, people suffer. A heavy silence followed. Valeria straightened and turned toward the staff. "Disconnect him," she ordered.
Now.
No one moved. That hesitation, brief as it was, felt like betrayal. Valeria's composure cracked. "Do it," she shouted. The outburst startled everyone. Valeria Romano did not shout. It was beneath her. And the moment she did, something important fractured. The nurse seized it. "If you force this," she said, louder now, "you will kill him. And everyone here will know it was your decision." Valeria spun back toward her, fury blazing. "You think your words matter more than my name?" "Yes," the nurse replied. "Because his life does." Valeria laughed again, but this time it was sharp and hollow.
"Then let's test that," she said.
"Security." Two guards stepped forward hesitantly. Valeria pointed at the nurse. "Escort her out." The guards looked at each other. One of them glanced toward the corridor, toward a figure standing just out of sight. Valeria noticed. Her eyes followed his gaze. And for the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across her face. She had pushed too far. She had spoken too loudly. She had shown everyone exactly who she was. And she didn't realize yet that the moment she lost control was the moment she lost everything. The monitors were the only things still speaking. Their steady beeping cut through the tension in the room, reminding everyone of the fragile life lying inches away from collapse. The elderly man's chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath looking harder than the last. The nurse glanced at him instinctively, her training overriding fear. She adjusted a line gently, her movements careful, practiced, protective. Valeria watched this with visible irritation. "What's his name?" Valeria asked suddenly. No one answered. She rolled her eyes. Of course no one knows. People like him are always nameless. "He's not," the nurse said quietly. "His name is Harold Harris." The name landed softly, but it mattered. Valeria scoffed. "And why should I care?" The nurse hesitated. This was the part she hadn't planned. She hadn't meant to say more. But silence felt wrong now. "Because he worked the docks for 40 years, she said. "Because he raised 2 children alone after his wife died. Because he came in with chest pain and waited 6 hours before anyone looked at him." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "He didn't complain," the nurse continued. "He said others probably needed help more than he did." Valeria's expression hardened. "This is irrelevant."
"It's not," the nurse replied.
"It's the reason he's still alive." She reached into the chart and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is his emergency contact," she said. "It's crossed out because there's no one left to call." The room grew painfully quiet. One of the younger nurses wiped at her eyes. "He doesn't have power," the night nurse went on. "He doesn't have money. He doesn't have a name that scares people. All he has is us." Valeria crossed her arms. "You're emotional," she said. "That makes you weak." "No," the nurse said, finally turning to face her fully. "It makes me responsible." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I work nights because my father is sick," she said. "I can't afford days. I can't afford mistakes. And I can't afford to pretend this is acceptable." Valeria opened her mouth to interrupt, but stopped. The nurse gestured gently toward the patient. "If you move him, he will die. And if he dies, it won't be quiet. It won't be invisible. Everyone in this room will carry it." The doctor cleared his throat. "She's right," he said. "His heart can't take the stress." Valeria stared at him, stunned. Another nurse spoke. "We've lost patients before," she whispered. "We don't need another." Fear was no longer aimed at the bed. It was aimed at Valeria. She sensed it. Her jaw tightened. "You're all forgetting who I am," she said coldly. "No," the nurse replied. "We're remembering who we're supposed to be." The words lingered in the air. And for the first time that night, Valeria Romano wasn't the most powerful person in the room. She was just a woman being watched. And somewhere nearby, someone had been listening very carefully to every word. The first crack appeared quietly. It came in the form of a chart, thin, creased, and hastily altered. The nurse noticed it when she reached for the patient's medication record. Something was wrong. Times didn't align. Dosages had been adjusted without proper authorization. A discharge note had been entered and then deleted. Her fingers stilled. "This wasn't here before," she said. Valeria's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" The nurse turned the chart around so the doctor could see it. "The ICU transfer request," she said. "It was approved an hour ago, but no one on this shift authorized it." The doctor frowned. "That doesn't make sense." He stepped closer, scanning the page. His brow furrowed. "This approval code, it's not mine." A murmur spread through the room. Valeria scoffed. "Are we really doing this now?" The nurse ignored her.
"Check the system," she said.
"Look at who entered it." The doctor hesitated, then moved to the terminal. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, every instinct screaming at him to stop. But something had shifted. Silence no longer felt safe. He logged in. The name appeared on the screen. Not Valeria Romano. Her assistant. The room went still. "That's impossible," Valeria snapped. "She wouldn't." "She is before," a voice said quietly. Everyone turned. Dr. Collins stepped forward from the back of the room. He was older, grayer, and had stayed silent all night.
"Until now."
"This isn't the first time," he said. "Patients have been moved. Files adjusted. Treatments delayed. Always when she visits." Valeria stared at him, disbelief flashing into fury. "You stayed quiet."
"So did everyone," he replied.
"Until tonight." He gestured toward the nurse. She didn't blink. That made it harder for the rest of us to keep pretending. Security footage was pulled. The screen flickered to life. Valeria watched herself arrive, cold, composed, untouchable. Then her assistant followed. The timestamp showed her entering the records room minutes later. Another clip played. A patient from months ago. Same pattern. Same outcome.
Death.
A nurse gasped softly. Valeria's composure cracked. "This is absurd," she said. "You're twisting." "Enough," a new voice said. The hospital director had arrived. He looked pale. "Lock this floor down," he ordered. "No one leaves." Valeria's eyes widened. "You can't do this." "I can," he replied. "And I should have done it sooner." Phones came out. Calls were made. Legal counsel. Compliance officers. Authorities. Statements poured in. Staff members who had stayed silent for years began speaking all at once about pressure, threats, sudden transfers, unexplained terminations, about fear. Valeria backed toward the door slowly. "This isn't over," she said. The nurse met her gaze. "It is for him," she said, glancing at the patient. "And it's about to be for you." Sirens echoed faintly outside. Valeria Romano stood surrounded, not by enemies, but by truth. And truth, once exposed, does not retreat. It only waits for judgment. No one noticed him at first. He stood just beyond the doorway, partially obscured by the glare of the overhead lights, listening without interruption. He had been there longer than anyone realized, long enough to hear the accusations, the evidence, the voices that had finally found their courage. Marco Romano did not rush. He never did. When he stepped forward, the room reacted instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones were lowered. Even the hospital director straightened unconsciously, as if gravity itself had shifted. Valeria felt it before she saw him. She turned slowly, and her face drained of color. "Marco," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You shouldn't be here." He didn't answer her. His gaze moved instead to the patient in the bed. The machines. The chart. The nurse standing quietly at the side, her hands steady despite everything that had happened. "How long?" Marco asked. The doctor hesitated. "If he'd been moved, minutes. Maybe less." Marco nodded once. He turned to the nurse. "You stopped it." "Yes," she replied. "I did." "Why?" "Because it was wrong." Marco studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he looked away, not in dismissal, but acknowledgement. He faced Valeria at last. "You embarrassed me," she said quickly. "These people misunderstood." "You embarrassed yourself," Marco replied calmly. The room went silent. I built my reputation on control, he continued. Order. Predictability. Fear has a place, but chaos does not. Valeria stepped closer, lowering her voice. They're lying. You know how they are. They see an opportunity. Marco raised a hand.
She stopped.
I listened, he said. I watched. I verified. He gestured toward the screen still paused on the footage of her assistant altering records. You made decisions in my name without understanding the cost. Valeria's voice trembled. I'm your wife. That makes it worse, Marco replied. The words landed like a verdict. He turned to the hospital director. You will cooperate fully with every investigation. No delays. No cover-ups. The director nodded immediately. Marco looked back at the staff. Anyone who tells the truth will be protected. A collective exhale rippled through the room. Valeria's composure finally cracked. You're choosing them over me?
I'm choosing order, Marco said.
And tonight, you became the problem. Security moved in, not toward the nurse, not toward the staff, but toward Valeria. She took a step back. You can't do this. Marco met her eyes, colder now. I already have. As Valeria was escorted out, her heels echoed down the corridor, sharp, uneven, powerless. Marco watched until she disappeared from sight. Then he turned once more to the nurse. You broke the rules, he said. She nodded. Yes. A pause.
Good, Marco said.
Some rules rot from the inside. He walked past her, toward the exit, leaving behind a hospital no longer ruled by fear. Behind him, the machines continued to beep. Steady. Certain. A life saved. And a power finally exposed. Valeria Romano had always believed power vanished quietly. People were removed. Stories were buried. Consequences happened behind closed doors. That was how it had always worked, for her, for Marco, for everyone connected to their world. She was wrong. By morning, the hospital no longer whispered. The investigation spread fast, faster than anyone expected. Compliance officers arrived before sunrise. Law enforcement followed soon after. Entire floors were sealed off, and staff who once avoided eye contact now gathered in small groups, exchanging looks that said the same thing. It's really happening. Valeria sat in a private conference room, hands folded tightly in her lap. No silk, no diamonds. Just a borrowed coat and the echo of her own breathing. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, missed calls, unread messages, but none of them came from Marco. The door opened. 2 officers entered, followed by the hospital's legal counsel. Their faces were professional, distant.
They didn't bow.
They didn't hesitate. Mrs. Romano, one officer said, we need you to come with us. Valeria lifted her chin. On what grounds? Endangerment, he replied. Coercion. Tampering with medical records. Her lips parted slightly. You have no proof. The officer slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots. Security stills. Signed statements. Time-stamped edits.
Names. Dates.
Patterns. Not one incident. Dozens. Valeria's composure shattered in slow motion. This is a misunderstanding, she said, voice tight. I was protecting interests. Whose? The lawyer asked. Valeria hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Across the hospital, staff members were being interviewed one by one. Nurses who had stayed silent for years finally spoke freely. Doctors admitted to pressure, threats, and directives that had nothing to do with medicine. The story formed quickly. And once it did, it couldn't be reshaped. By mid-morning, the hospital director held a press conference. Cameras lined the entrance. Reporters leaned forward, hungry. We are cooperating fully with authorities, he said. Any individual found responsible will be held accountable. Valeria watched from a screen as her name appeared in captions. Mafia boss's wife under investigation, private hospital scandal. She stood when the officers told her to, walked when they instructed her to. For the first time in years, she followed instead of led. As she passed through the corridor, staff members lined the walls, some watching silently, others openly staring. No one stepped aside. No one lowered their eyes. Fear had changed direction. Valeria caught a glimpse of the ICU as she was escorted past it. The elderly patient lay stable now, his color improving, machine steady.
Alive.
The nurse stood nearby, reviewing notes, unaware of Valeria's gaze. That was when Valeria understood. She hadn't lost power because of Marco. She hadn't lost it because of the law. She had lost it because one ordinary person refused to stay silent. Outside, cameras flashed. And as Valeria Romano stepped into public view, her fall was no longer private. It was complete. The hospital felt different after Valeria Romano was gone. Not quieter, lighter. The tension that had once lived in the walls seemed to drain away, replaced by cautious movement and unfamiliar honesty. Staff spoke openly now, voices no longer hushed. Doors that once stayed closed were left slightly ajar. It was as if everyone was relearning how to breathe. Investigators remained on site for days. Every record was reviewed. Every questionable decision traced back to its source. Doctors who had once feared retaliation now told the truth without interruption. Nurses submitted written statements, some trembling as they did, others calm with relief. For the first time in years, fear was not the loudest voice in the room. The elderly patient, Harold Harris, improved steadily. By the third day, he was breathing on his own. By the fifth, he was sitting upright, asking quietly where he was and why so many people kept checking on him. When someone finally explained that a nurse had spoken up for him, he shook his head in disbelief. She didn't have to, he said softly. But she had. The night nurse was called into the director's office later that week. She expected questions, maybe warnings, possibly consequences. Instead, she found the hospital board waiting. The director stood. "You did what others wouldn't," he said. "And, because of that, lives were saved." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion offer. Day's shift if she wanted it. Oversight responsibilities. Legal protection written clearly into policy. Her signature would not disappear into a drawer. Her voice would not be ignored again. She stared at the paper, stunned. "I was just doing my job," she said quietly. "That," the director replied, "is exactly why you deserve this." Word spread quickly. Staff stopped her in hallways to thank her, some awkwardly, some emotionally. A few apologized for not stepping in sooner. She accepted each word with humility, never once claiming credit she didn't seek. Outside the hospital, the investigation continued. Charges were filed. Licenses reviewed. Funds frozen. The Romano name, once spoken with fear, now appeared in legal documents and court schedules. Power that had operated in shadows was dragged into the light, where it could no longer hide. Marco Romano made no public statements. He didn't need to. The message was clear enough. One night, near the end of her shift, the nurse returned to Harold's room. He smiled when he saw her. "You're the one," he said. "The one who stopped them." She shook her head gently. "I just stayed." He reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "Sometimes that's enough." As she left the room, the nurse paused at the window overlooking the city. The lights stretched endlessly, bright and ordinary and alive. Fear had once ruled this place. Now, something else had taken its place. Justice. And it had arrived quietly, carried by someone who refused to look away. The night shift returned to normal. Not immediately. Normal took time. But slowly, Saint Aurelius Private Hospital settled into a rhythm that no longer revolved around fear. The lights still dimmed after midnight. The halls still echoed with distant footsteps and rolling carts. Machines still beeped through the night, measuring lives in steady intervals. But something fundamental had changed. The nurse adjusted her badge as she walked down the corridor, her pace unhurried. She no longer felt the knot in her stomach that once tightened whenever unfamiliar footsteps approached. No longer scanned faces, wondering who might be watching. She stopped briefly outside the ICU. Harold Harris slept peacefully now, color returned to his face, chest rising evenly without assistance. A small note rested on the table beside his bed, written in shaky handwriting. Thank you for seeing me. She smiled softly and stepped away. Outside, dawn crept over the city, painting the skyline in pale gold. Morning staff arrived with coffee cups and quiet greetings. Life moved forward as it always did. But beneath the routine, a story lingered, one that would be told in fragments and whispers for years to come. About the night a powerful woman lost everything. About the hospital that learned to stand on its own. And about a nurse who didn't raise her voice, didn't seek attention, and didn't wait for permission. Marco Romano never returned to the hospital. His name faded from conversations, replaced by policy updates and ethics training. Donations were rerouted. Oversight committees formed. Systems were built not around influence, but accountability. Power adapted. It always does. The nurse declined interviews. She avoided praise. When asked why she spoke up that night, she gave the same answer every time. Because it was right. Nothing more. On her last shift of the week, she paused at the nurse's station, watching as a younger nurse confidently corrected a doctor without fear. The exchange was professional.
Calm.
Respected. That moment mattered more than any promotion. As she stepped outside, the city hummed around her. Cars, voices, ordinary noise. No sirens. No chaos. Just life continuing. She blended into the crowd, anonymous once again. But anonymity didn't mean insignificance. Because somewhere inside Saint Aurelius, a rule had been rewritten, not on paper, but in memory. Fear was no longer the loudest force in the room. Courage was. And it didn't arrive with power, or wealth, or a dangerous name. It arrived quietly, on the night shift, spoken in a steady voice, by someone who chose to stay. If this story moved you even a little, don't let it end in silence. Like the video, so stories like this keep getting told. Comment if you believe speaking up still matters. And subscribe because courage deserves to be remembered.